Hello, students, and welcome to week 6. Week 6 brings us to the topic of lifespan development and sexuality. And so for this week, we're going to be taking a look at the Murray, Pope, and Willis book, Chapter 5, Lifespan Development and Sexuality. I like the quote that this chapter starts off with: "The people are sexual beings. To deny our sexuality is to deny our humanity. It should come as no surprise, therefore, that our sexuality begins at the moment of birth and lasts until our death, even if we live a long life." And so it's important to remember that sexuality just doesn't just incorporate the time from puberty, through the childbearing years, but starts at day one, and it continues on until we die. And so it's really important to look at the full lifespan when we think about sexuality. So this chapter does go over a couple different theoretical models, Erikson and Franz and White and Freud and Piaget and all of that. They're different models of development and ways in which this sort of spans the entire life cycle. Exercise 5.1 has a guided reflection activity that could be really great to look at. It asks, like, what sexuality related experiences do you think should begin during childhood, adolescence, adulthood, or young adulthood, middle adulthood, older adulthood, and what should happen at each stage of life. And this is a really great reflection to work on. It can kind of help with the discussion post this week, which I'll get into a little bit later, but just kind of taking a look at what you feel like is sort of like, quote, normal, or within the normal range. And so the chapter goes on to break sexuality into different stages. So it starts off at the prenatal stage, so things that are kind of happening while we're still in the womb and prior to birth, and then what happens during infancy. There are some boxes that break up the developmental models as well, Freud and Erikson and Piaget. Gets into early childhood as well and preschool age, and kind of looks at different common behaviors and different things that are happening within us. Exercise 5.2 looks at working with parents of young children. A lot of times they may have questions about what's normal or what their children should be doing or not doing, and how to respond to the behaviors that their children may be engaging in. And so that's really important to consider and to work on. And we're going to get into that a little bit with the Bueller textbook. Has a lot of great resources in it. Keeps moving on. School age children. Exercise 5.3 focuses on sex education in childhood or adolescent, and what you feel comfortable with the schools educating students on. This is a very controversial topic and discussion, but it's good to know where you stand so that you have a good idea of the framework and the viewpoint that you're coming from, so that when you work with clients who may have a bit of a different framework or viewpoint, you won't insert your own biases or opinions or values or beliefs onto the work that you're doing with them, and allow them to explore it for themselves. In addition, it's important to note that just because a client may feel similar to us or have some of the same viewpoints as we do, it doesn't mean that they're exactly the same, and so we should still not make any assumptions. Moves right along into adolescence and everything that happens during that time period, and right into adulthood, which again is broken into young adulthood, middle adulthood, and older adulthood. It ends up with an exercise 5.4 is a case conceptualization on sexual development, which also really can help you out with the discussion post for this week as well. So that is it for that chapter. We do have 2 readings in the Bueller textbook this week. The first one is on Chapter 3, Sexual Anatomy and Psychosexual Development. This one goes into a little bit more with connecting the stuff that you've read about in the Murray, Pope, and Willis text, and it connects it to the different internal structures and external structures, and so it gets into a little bit of the stuff that we talked about in week 4 and maybe 5, a little bit about the anatomy and structures and how all of that develops at different ages. So it really breaks it down to what is happening developmentally or excuse me, physically in those different age ranges. And as all of the chapters in here, it ends with some wonderful takeaway points, activities that you can engage in to further your knowledge of the topic. And then it has resources that you could offer to teen clients, to parents, and then it has general references. Finally, the addendum to the chapter is Kegel exercises and how they can be done, and how you can kind of talk to clients about working on them, because they can be really helpful at any age, at all ages. And then our final chapter for this week is getting into chapter 17 of the Bueller book, which is Sexuality and Aging, which does cover some of the stuff that is in the main textbook, the Murray, Pope, and Willis, but it goes into a little bit more detail with it. It talks about myths about sexuality in older adults, and some of these may be things that you've believed or kind of biases that you've held. Different obstacles that cause issues as we get older, biological changes. It has some great little step into my office scenarios. I love those, and thinking about what, how would you work with a client that came in with these different things. Talks about male decline in sexual functioning. Again, has another little case study in there. Sexually transmitted diseases in older adults, social experiences. Nursing homes is a big one, and you'll see some stuff linked below that's related to that topic. Psychological changes, relationship changes. It has a little assessment of sexual problems in aging adults, which could be really great if you're working with an older population, or you have some clients who are a little bit older, and being able to assess how they're doing and where they're at. Again, has some great takeaway points and activities for you to engage in. Some of the wonderful movies it talks about watching and reflecting on sexuality in older adults. Hope Springs, Something's Gotta Give. That's a great movie about sexuality as we get older. Harold and Maude, and Away From Her. So some different movies to check out. It has some resources and references, and the addendum to this chapter is Enjoying Sex as a Mature Adult. So that can be, direct information that you can give to clients, and to better, help them with whatever it is they may be experiencing and going through. And so as I started off talking a little bit about developmental and sexual development and stuff, I said that this is related to our discussion post for this week. You're going to be creating a sexual timeline. So you're going to actually be creating two timelines. The first one is developmental milestones that you hit, and then you're going to make a parallel one that is sexual milestones. And so that could be anything from the first time that you were aware of sex, or that you saw a sex scene in a movie, or someone talk about sex, or heard the word sex. It could be feelings, physical, emotional feelings that you've had, and things that you can explicitly remember, or the first time that your parents or another adult taught you about sex, or when you were in class you had sex ed, and what kind of information you got. And so it can be any of those things. And what you want to look at is both of those timelines together, and notice patterns or connections in different things, and really paying attention to what your idea of normal is, and what you experienced as being normal or late or ahead of the curve, and recognizing that while sometimes we feel like the things that we've experienced may be, abnormal, actually are quite normal. And so doing this in a discussion post is a great way to connect to your peers and see, what some of the similarities and differences are, and talk about that kind of stuff. So that is your discussion post for this week. This week we also are engaging in quiz 2, and so you want to make sure that for quiz 2 you're preparing by looking at the announcement that has all of the study guides from week 4, 5, and 6. All of those are going to be included in the quiz this week. So that is it for our week 6. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to have live Zoom meetings, and so I won't be posting a video, but I'll be posting some additional supplemental materials. And then you'll see a video again from me in week 9. So have a great week, and thank you.